Hi everyone, in this video I want to talk about reflective practice, which has been really impactful for me as a coach, and I've used quite a lot to help other athletes to just consider how their actions may have led to certain outcomes and how we can learn from experiences by using a sort of model to help us to get there. It's not something that gets taught quite a lot, but once you've mastered the art of reflecting on your own experiences and on how things have led to certain outcomes, it's a really kind of impactful skill to have because it means you can extract meaning from those experiences you've had. So I'm hoping this short video is going to be useful for you to just kind of think about how you do reflect, a system to enable you to do that, and overall the main benefit to you is going to be able to extract meaning from things that happen to you so that you can improve the experience moving forward and gain valuable learning insights and experiences. So reflection in general is something which is potentially referred to but not necessarily taught in systematic ways. Really what we mean about reflective practice or reflecting is considering what happened, how it happened, what the positives were, what the negatives were, what led to that outcome in the end, and then what we can use as an action plan moving forwards. And so by the end of this video I'm going to give you a little model to help you to work through this if anything does happen to you. Often it can be used in negative situations, but it can also be used in positive situations too, to kind of refine and really extract meaning from, okay, what did I do that enabled these positive things to happen? Did you do some particularly useful training? Did you do some particularly helpful or insightful things that helped you to kind of create an action plan for getting there? There are lots of ways that you can use this, both positively and on the flip side. If something negative does happen, like let's say you don't gain a selection or you don't perform as well as possible, it enables you to kind of break that down a little bit and again, as I say, extract meaning. So there's a famous quote from Dewey which says, "We do not learn from experience, we gain from reflecting on experience." What this means is that simply by being present in a situation and enabling events to happen to us does not mean we've really gained an experience. It just means that we've experienced an event, if that makes sense. And so what we're trying to do is reflect on what happened in order to gain an experience which is going to inform what we do in the future, either positively or negatively, either reinforcing the good, perhaps altering or refining the things that weren't so good. And so we have to reflect on that in order to do it. Now, you're probably doing this already in some capacity, and there are two different types I'll go into. But long story short, you can either reflect whilst something's happening, or you can reflect on it after it's happened, and that's often where the most valuable learning experiences come from. So reflective practice is the process of reflecting on our actions in order to engage in continuous learning and gain meaningful insights that impact future behaviours. So what we mean is that by reflecting on what we do, and those actions could be not necessarily physical actions, but our intentions and kind of things that we did in the process, are going to enable us to engage in learning experiences that impact our future behaviours. So it helps us to refine our behaviours, improve things for the future, and ultimately lead to better outcomes. So as an athlete, this is important because if something hasn't gone the way you wanted it to go, it's important that you are able to extract the learning outcomes from that process, so you know that when it comes around next time, you've got an action plan for what to do differently next time. Alternatively, if we don't go through this, and this is probably something that people who are less open in general will do, is they will probably do a similar thing again because they haven't got the awareness of how their actions may have led to an outcome. So what's important here is that we're open and conscious about what we're doing, so much so that we can really improve our actions and our behaviours for the future. So this is something I learned from the IS, which is about turning events into experiences. So not allowing things just to simply happen to us, but to really kind of refine those and extract important learning experiences from that. Okay, so it's a key kind of flip from just allowing things to happen to you and to really gaining valuable insights. So there are two different types. We can either reflect in action, which is a process we follow in the moment. So subtle changes in our behaviour in response to body language, and this often happens with less conscious thought. So this is something which can be a little bit subconscious, I suppose. Maybe you're talking to a group and you notice that people aren't finding you funny. You're trying to say something funny and you just realise that actually it's not going very well. So you change your behaviour very quickly to adapt to the group in order to, communicate in a way that actually is effective and engages people around you. That's one example. Kind of socially, it might also be, if you're in a coaching session, something's not going quite so well, you're probably going to change your behavior quite quickly the more experienced you are. And certainly the more experienced you are, the less conscious those kind of subtle changes probably are going to be. So these are the things that happen in the moment. As things aren't quite going so right, we're going to change it and we're going to learn as we go. So a little bit of iteration in this process. The thing that is most useful, in my opinion at least, or certainly gains more long-term value, is reflection on action, which is a more conscious process we go through following an experience, which is where we rationalize events and begin taking lessons from them. Something which I guess is important from this to kind of just look into for a second is that we can think logically and we can think emotionally, and we do both. Often in the moment we're thinking a little bit more less logical and probably a little bit more emotional. So if things aren't going so well, you probably get those feelings of perhaps a bit of stress, frustration, upset, any number of things might be not going quite so well. If we, on the flip side, if it's going really well, it might just be kind of euphoric and full of adrenaline, and you're also not thinking particularly logically either. So the benefit of this after the event is that you're basically thinking really logically, and you're not just thinking about what's happening in the moment. You're actually really thinking and breaking down the whole process, so actually you can see things for what they are. This is again the benefit of someone else kind of coaching through these things, because you enable others to kind of give a different perspective, and that also adds a lot of value. So if you can learn this skill yourself, it means that you can obviously coach yourself a little bit, which is extremely useful. Now before I go into the model, as time goes on, you're going to get better at this, so you're going to be able to do it without having to write it down, but initially try and write these steps down. And so I'm going to talk you through the model. It's called Gibbs' reflective cycle, and initially start by writing each step down in as much detail as you can, but even if it's just a couple of lines, that's fine, and just kind of get into the habit of doing it. And as time goes on, you'll notice that you're going to be able to do this without needing to actually write it down. You can almost go through the whole cycle in your mind and extract meaning on it, because you can see things for what they are as you become better and more skilled at reflective practice. So this is the model which I personally use quite a bit, or have been taught how to use, and I've taught others to use it as well, because it's a very helpful kind of systematic approach to reflective practice. So it's called Gibbs' reflective cycle. The purpose of this is to systematically break down an event in order to gain insight and meaning, in order to kind of improve your behaviours for the future to get better outcomes. In other words, reflective practice in a nutshell. So we start at the top, and we kind of describe what happened during the event, just as it was. No judgment, no emotions involved in this. Just simply what happened. What went well, what didn't go so well comes later. Your interpretation of it will come later. Just put what happened. What was the outcome of this event that you were trying to gain some insight from? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a selection that didn't quite go so well, or a performance that didn't go quite so well, or a training session wasn't very good. Just state the facts. A session didn't go very well would be an example. Feelings, what were you thinking and feeling? So it's either going to be, these are basically emotions you're trying to list out now. Was it frustration? Was it anger? Was it excitement? Was it, any number of different things you can list here. Whatever was the kind of core emotion you felt at the time, just list them out, because we should listen to those kind of emotional signals that we get. Because we can refer to them later on. It's important we can kind of link our emotions to events just as much as we can think logically at the same time. Next step is what was good and what was bad. And what's very important about this step is that although you may have had a negative experience, you have to be able to list out what was good. That's quite challenging if something's gone really badly wrong, but there has to be something good, even if that was something as simple as this not going so well enabled me to gain an important learning lesson from this process, as an example, would be one. There's always that which you can refer to, like no matter how bad something was, you can always learn something from it. So that's one example. But whatever it was, all the good, all the bad, just list them all out. Again, without judgment, just simply list them. The next step is then analysis. So what sense can you make of the situation? Now you can start to extract the goods and the bads, the emotions you were feeling and what happened. What kind of sense are you starting to make here? What do you think potentially happened to kind of lead to the sort of end result, if you like. Then the conclusion, so what else could you have done? So the conclusion there is, given what was good and what was bad, given what you think led to the outcome, what do you think you could have done differently moving forwards? Okay, so very simply, probably a line or two for this one. What else could you have done? And then finally, you've got an action plan, which is, if it arose again, what are you now going to do differently? And this is probably the most important thing of the whole process, because the action plan is actually what you're going to change moving forwards based on this experience that is going to enable you to improve your behaviors to get better outcomes in the future. So an example of this, if I take you through it, might be in my own coaching. There was an example, for example, where about 3 years ago, was working with a team. During a camp, a player who was returning from injury was about to do a test, a pretty high intensity test, and they weren't ready to do it. And basically, because there were so many things going on in the day, I'd missed this key detail. So the description would have been, a player was about to do a test that wasn't appropriate because they were returning from injury, and basically the head coach got very angry, because rightly so, you're putting players at risk who shouldn't have been. So that was what happened. There's no emotion involved in that. That's just the kind of raw facts of the matter. Feelings at the time was guilt, because clearly I put a player at risk. Frustration, because I set myself very high standards, and that really didn't feel good. I felt frustrated with myself that I'd missed that. And I think also there was an element there of just a kind of a feeling of, being a bit upset, because the relationships on myself and the head coach had been tarnished as well, and that's never a good thing. So there were probably three core emotions there. What was good and what was bad? What was good about this was that, other coaches were there to stop it from happening, because they were able to kind of step in and, stop it before it happened. Ultimately, nothing did happen. There wasn't actually anyone getting injured. Nothing significantly bad actually happened. There was just the potential for something bad to happen. What was bad about the experience, again, was probably that little bit of trust got lost between myself and the coach. The player probably felt a little bit kind of unsure of why they were going into that test when they were coming back from an injury, and ultimately it wasn't a particularly positive experience for testing for everyone involved. What sense can you make in this situation? Basically, I said I had a squad of 30 players, for example, to kind of get testing organised for. And very simply, I was trying to do too much. I was trying to be here, there and everywhere, trying to do all the jobs on the day, and I just didn't delegate enough. And because of that, the player involved, who was doing a slightly different test, it just kind of passed me by, because I didn't have my eye on the ball at the time, because I was thinking about the other tests I was trying to get set up and that kind of thing. So in conclusion, what I should have done was delegate more. I should have had a better kind of plan to help, to use other coaches to help me to facilitate this. And if that had happened, I would have probably not have missed that detail. So an action plan going forwards for the future from that point was, I always mapped out the whole testing day, looked at pinch points of when I was going to be spread too thin, and always ensured that I communicated to other coaches and the players exactly what was involved at every step, in order that I wouldn't miss these key details. And sure enough, the next time it came around was a much smoother process. I didn't have as much on my plate. Other people took on more of the slack during the day, and the testing day ran a lot more smoothly. So that could be one example. You can use the exact same process for your own performance, training sessions, outcomes, matches, selections, education, academic stuff, socially, any number of ways you can use this. But I hope that's a really useful kind of summary of how you can go through this reflective process in order to extract meaning, turn events into experiences, and ultimately improve behaviours and outcomes in the future.